The sweltering heat of a Houston evening clung to the pavement like syrup, casting long shadows as commuters bustled past, their eyes fixed on their destinations. Amid the blur of footsteps and car horns, a teenage girl stood motionless on the corner of Main and Franklin, her worn sneakers scuffing the concrete. Clutched in her hands was a humble bouquet of dandelions, bluebonnets, wild clover, bound by twine. Alina James, 16, held them out with hesitant hope each time someone passed, but no one stopped. A mother tugged her child away. A businessman looked through her as though she were fog on glass. Then came laughter, sharp, cruel. A group of girls in crisp uniforms slowed just enough to smirk. "Nobody wants your roadside weeds," one said with theatrical disgust, tossing her hair as they walked on, their derision trailing behind them like expensive perfume. Alina didn't flinch. Her lips trembled, but her eyes held. She didn't cry, just stood a little straighter, gripping the stems tighter, refusing to wilt like the flowers in her hands. Then came the black car, sleek, low, unmarked. It slid to a stop beside the curb with barely a sound. The tinted window rolled down just enough to reveal a face clean-shaven, composed, with eyes that scanned not the flowers, but the girl herself. The passenger door opened. Alina froze. A voice from inside, calm and even, called out, "How much for all of them?" She blinked. $10, she whispered, uncertain. The man Marcus Langford, though she didn't yet know that, reached into his wallet and handed her a $100 bill. "Keep the change," he said. "Come back tomorrow." Confused, Alina held out the flowers, expecting him to take them, but instead he asked, "What's your name?" "Alina," she replied softly. He nodded once, then closed the door. The car drove off, flowers untouched, leaving her staring down at the money in her hand. The moment clung to her skin like the Houston heat. Who was that man? Why her? And what did he see in a girl everyone else ignored? Alina James had grown used to being invisible. At 16, her life bore the weight of responsibilities most adults would stagger beneath. Each day after school, she returned not to a safe haven but to a cramped two-room apartment that smelled faintly of antiseptic and wilted dreams. Her mother Vanessa, once vibrant and full of laughter, now spent her days confined to a worn recliner, her left side paralyzed from a stroke 2 years prior. The stroke had taken more than Vanessa's mobility, had taken their security, their stability, their future. With no father in sight, he had walked out when Alina was 8 and never looked back. The burden of survival fell squarely on Alina's narrow shoulders. There was no choice, no time for childhood. She began selling flowers because no one would hire her. Too young, they all said. Come back when you're legal. But hunger didn't wait for birthdays. One afternoon, while wandering near the edge of downtown, she discovered a patch of wildflowers blooming stubbornly behind a long-abandoned church. It felt like a secret the city had forgotten, so she picked them, bunched them together with twine, and stood by the roadside, offering them to anyone who would look. Most didn't. Some offered pocket change. A few turned their heads as if her very presence offended them. And the girls at school, always polished, always laughing maid. Sure, she never forgot where she stood. The flower girl, they called her with sneers. They never knew she skipped lunch, because what little money she made had to stretch across rent, groceries, and her mother's prescriptions. They didn't see her counting coins by candlelight or drinking tap water while pretending she wasn't. Hungry, Alina had learned to endure. She didn't cry in public. She didn't speak unless spoken to. Her walls were high, her eyes sharp. She was observant, watched people like puzzles, learned who to avoid, who might give, who would mock. Trust was a currency she couldn't afford. Yet beneath the armor, there was still a flicker of the girl she might have been. One who remembered bedtime stories and Sunday pancakes. One who hadn't yet learned how cold the world could be. Then came Marcus Langford. His car, his suit, his quiet confidence, all of it screamed wealth, control, distance. But he didn't just buy her flowers. He stopped. He looked. And something passed between them in that moment. Not recognition exactly, but resonance. Marcus wasn't a man given to whims. Everything in his life was calculated, structured, measured. He had returned to Houston after 12 years away, trading the chaos of out-of-state ventures for something quieter, more deliberate. Real estate had made him rich, but solitude had shaped him. No wife, no children, no attachments. People whispered about his past, speculated about the loss that carved out the hollow in his gaze. But Marcus never answered questions he hadn't asked himself. When he saw Elena thin, proud, unflinching, offering weeds as though they were roses, it hit him like a ghost brushing past. She reminded him of someone, not in appearance, but in posture, in fight. And so he stopped, not out of pity, but purpose. It wasn't random. Marcus Langford didn't believe in random. He believed in signs, in debts unpaid. And Elena James, though she didn't know it yet, had just stepped into the center of something far bigger than herself. The next day, the sky hung low with the threat of rain, but Elena returned to her usual spot anyway, her small bouquet clutched tightly in hand. She stood where the sidewalk cracked near the traffic light, her eyes flicking between passing cars and disinterested pedestrians. Hope, these days, was a fragile thing. When the sleek black car pulled up again, her pulse quickened up with excitement, but guarded wariness. The window didn't roll down this time. Instead, the door opened and Marcus Langford stepped out. In person, he seemed even more out of place than his car-tailored suit. Polished shoes, quiet composure, but there was no condescension in his eyes, just calm focus. "I want to talk," he said. Elena tightened her grip on the flowers. "About what?" Marcus didn't waste time. He told her he owned a number of rental properties around the city, and one of them needed work, specifically the garden, which had become an overgrown mess. He needed someone to clean it up, weed it, bring it back to life. Part-time, he added. Pays weekly, flexible hours. No questions about her age. No forms. "Why me?" she asked, suspicion flaring in her voice. "Because you didn't cry when they laughed at you," he said simply. That stopped her. Her mouth parted slightly, caught between disbelief and something she couldn't name. It wasn't praise exactly, but it felt like something close to respect. She didn't say yes right away. Elena had learned that every offer came with a price, even if you didn't see it at first. But hunger and desperation left little room for pride. "I can try," she said finally, her voice cautious. Marcus nodded once, gestured toward the car. "Let's go." The ride was quiet, the air inside the car cool and faintly scented with leather. She watched him from the corner of her eye, still braced for some kind of trick. But he didn't speak again until they pulled up to a quiet street tucked behind a line of trees. The house they stopped at was beautiful in an understated, almost forgotten way, white painted brick, ivy creeping up the side, wrap-around porch. But the front yard was wild, overtaken by weeds and tall grass, as if nature had started to reclaim it. Marcus handed her a pair of gloves from the trunk. "Let's see what you can do." She didn't expect him to watch her work, but he did, not hovering, just present. Over the next few days, she returned after school, sometimes working into the fading light. She dug, trimmed, hauled out roots with blistered hands, her shirt damp with sweat and grit under her nails. For the first time in a long while, her labor felt like it mattered. No one mocked her here, no one dismissed her, and Marcus, though mostly quiet, always acknowledged her progress with a nod or the occasional good work. At the end of the week, he met her by the gate and handed her an envelope. She opened it, expecting maybe $20, $30. Inside was $150 in crisp bills. Alina stared down at the money like it wasn't real, like it might vanish if she blinked. She didn't take the bus home. She ran. Her shoes slapped the pavement as adrenaline pushed her forward. The envelope clutched to her chest. Bursting through the apartment door, she knelt beside her mother's chair, her voice breathless and shaking. Vanessa stirred, confused. As Alina pulled out the medication list she kept folded in her backpack like a relic. For the first time in months, she could afford the real prescriptions, the ones that worked. Not the cheaper substitutes that dulled symptoms, but did little else. That night, as her mother slept easier than she had in weeks, Alina sat at the table in the dark, hands still dusted with soil, and stared at the cash. It wasn't just money, it was possibility. And it had come from a man she still didn't understand. Each week, Alina returned to the garden. The first job had grown into something steadier, quieter, almost sacred. Marcus never hovered, never pried, but he was always there offering gloves, demonstrating how to prune roses without damaging the stems, teaching her how to coax life out of soil. He spoke with a calm certainty that made her feel less exposed, like nothing she said would be used against her later. And slowly, Alina began to talk. Not all at once, not everything, but enough. She told him about her mother, how the stroke had taken more than just her strength, how every day felt like a silent race against eviction, against hunger, against time. She told him how job applications disappeared into black holes, how she'd learned to smile without showing her teeth so people wouldn't see the exhaustion in her. Marcus never pitied her. He just listened, like her words had weight. In his presence, for the first time, Alina felt a kind of safety she didn't know how to name. He wasn't soft or sentimental, but his silence held respect, and that respect wrapped around her like armor. The overgrown garden became their unspoken ritual, elbow deep in dirt, weeds pulled by hand, hours passing in the kind of peace Alina hadn't felt in years. Her hands got stronger, so did her heart, but peace never lasted long in Alina's world. Whispers started first, half glances from neighbors, the way her landlord stared a little too long when she came home in Marcus's car. Then came the accusations. One afternoon, the landlord caught her outside and sneered, "Must be nice, having some rich man take care of you." The implication clung to her skin like filth. At school, things got worse. The girls who used to call her flower girl found new ammunition. "He, your sugar daddy," one asked in a syrupy tone, loud enough to echo through the hallway. Another added, "Must be good at something, he's not hiring you for your gardening skills." Laughter followed her like a cloud. Then came the teachers. She was pulled into the office, sat down between two guidance counselors with forced smiles and careful words. "We're just concerned," they said. "It's unusual, a grown man spending time with a student outside of school." They didn't accuse her outright, but the message was clear. Alina sat stiff in her chair, throat tight, barely able to speak past the wave of humiliation rising in her chest. They didn't care about her mother. They didn't ask if she needed help. They just wanted the story to go away. That evening, when she arrived at the garden, she didn't pick up the gloves. She stood in the driveway, fists clenched, jaw trembling. "Did you know this would happen?" she demanded when Marcus emerged from the side porch. "Did you know people would twist it? That they'd say things about me about you?" Her voice cracked, but she didn't back down. Marcus met her gaze, calm as ever, though a flicker of something passed behind his eyes. "I know what people say," he said quietly. "I also know what's true." The words hit harder than she expected. She wanted to scream at him, to make him feel the weight of her shame, but something in his voice stilled her. Marcus stepped closer, hands in his pockets, gaze steady. "You remind me of someone," he said, "not in how you look, in how you hold yourself, like the world's pressing down and you're too proud to ask for help." Alina didn't move. "My daughter, Tasha," he continued, voice rougher now. She was your age. Smart, kind, didn't fit in. The other girls made her life hell. They said, things spread rumors. She thought no one saw her, that no one ever would. He paused, swallowing. 5 years ago, she took her own life. The silence that followed was a vacuum. Elena's breath caught in her chest, her anger bleeding out into stillness. She hadn't expected this, hadn't imagined Marcus carried a grief that mirrored her own, just in different colors. She needed one person to see her, he said softly, and nobody did. Elena stood frozen, her mind swimming, the garden around them suddenly impossibly quiet. For the first time in weeks, she didn't know what to say, but something shifted between them in that moment, something deeper than sympathy. It was recognition, not just of pain, but of survival. And Elena realized that maybe this strange, guarded man hadn't saved her out of pity or guilt, but because he knew what it meant to feel unseen, and he wasn't going to let her disappear. It started with a phone held just high enough to catch the moment. Elena, tired from pruning the hedges at the rental house, had slid into Marcus's car like she always did, quiet, grateful, unaware. She didn't notice the stranger across the street filming, didn't hear the snicker behind the camera or the muttered words that would become a viral caption. Hours later, teen flower girl and her mystery sugar daddy. The video spread like wildfire on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram. People commented in droves, throwing out slurs, assumptions, and sick jokes. By the time Elena saw it, her name was already trending. Screenshots circled the school. Classmates stared. Some smirked, others whispered behind hands. Then the school intervened, not to protect her, but to suspend her pending further investigation. Elena couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. The shame was suffocating. She avoided Marcus's calls at first, afraid even he would see her differently now. But when she finally showed up at the house, he was exactly the same, calm, steady. Stay quiet, he told her gently. I'll handle it. His composure made her want to cry, but things were already spiraling. Vanessa, her mother, overheard whispers on the news and online. She demanded answers, her voice thick with fear and anger. Elena brought her to the garden house, trembling as she watched Marcus face the woman she loved most. Vanessa asked the questions everyone else had implied. What do you want from my daughter? Why are you helping her? Marcus didn't flinch. He answered respectfully, evenly, telling her everything about Tasha, about the garden, about the work. He said Elena reminded him of someone he'd failed, and he didn't want to fail again. Vanessa listened in silence, tears in her eyes, and when he finished, she nodded once. That was enough for her, but it wasn't enough for the world. Days later, the real blow landed. A viral expose written by a freelance journalist hungry for clicks. Wealthy man grooming teen flower seller. The headline blared across news feeds. The article twisted everything: Marcus's wealth, Elena's age, her vulnerability into a narrative built for scandal. They used the video. They quoted anonymous, concerned citizens. They left out the truth. The backlash was immediate and brutal. Marcus's tenants began breaking leases. Companies he partnered with pulled out of contracts. Online, he was painted as a predator. Elena watched helplessly as the man who had quietly lifted her out of survival was dragged through the mud by people who didn't know him, didn't care. Guilt clawed at her. She felt like the match that lit the fire. One afternoon, unable to take it anymore, she went to the house and found Marcus in the backyard, trimming a line of overgrown lavender. She ran to him, breathless and panicked. You have to say something, she begged. Tell them what really happened. Clear your name, please. Her voice cracked with desperation. Marcus looked at her, eyes tired but warm. He shook his head, gently. The people who matter will know the truth, he said. And you, Elena, more than this moment. She stared at him, speechless. He wasn't angry. He wasn't broken. He was choosing dignity over defense, truth over spectacle. And in that moment, Alina realized what it meant to live with integrity, even when the world got it all wrong. 2 weeks passed, and the chaos slowly began to unravel. The lies that had once ignited the fire started to burn themselves out. It began with a quiet rippling, anonymous post from a teacher at Alina's school. No name, just screenshots of her academic record, notes praising her diligence, her perfect attendance, and a gentle mention of her home situation, her mother's stroke, the missed meals, the way she sold flowers just to survive. The post didn't ask for sympathy, it simply told the truth. Then another voice joined in, a tenant from one of Marcus's buildings, who posted a video revealing how, during the worst days of the pandemic, Marcus had quietly paid rent for several struggling families without ever taking credit. He never wanted thanks, the tenant said, holding up a faded handwritten note from Marcus. He just didn't want anyone thrown out. The tide turned, slowly, at first doubt creeping into the comment sections, people retracting their earlier accusations, but then it swelled. Public opinion shifted. The internet, as quickly as it condemned, began to apologize. But Alina didn't wait for permission to reclaim her voice. At a school assembly hastily organized by administrators eager to save face, she stood before her classmates, teachers, and the very people who had laughed at her just weeks before. Dressed simply, with no makeup or polish, she stepped up to the mic with trembling hands but steady eyes. "Kindness isn't always neat," she began. "It's not always loud, but it matters. I was judged for being poor, and again for being helped. People saw what they wanted to see. But I've learned that I'd rather be kind and misunderstood than cruel and accepted." Her words hung in the air, quiet but unshakable. When she stepped down, the silence cracked into applause, and hours later, her speech was everywhere shared across social media, news sites, television segments. Requests for interviews poured in, but Alina didn't chase the spotlight. She didn't need it. Marcus never appeared in any of the coverage. He didn't make statements, didn't defend himself. He simply handed Alina a plain envelope. A few days later, inside was a new apartment lease for her and Vanessa. A better place, safe, clean, paid in full for a year. No cameras, no headlines, just his quiet signature at the bottom and a single line written in his familiar, careful handwriting: "You deserve more than survival." Not long after, a woman from a local non-profit reached out, said she'd seen the speech, had followed Alina's story, and wondered if she'd be interested in a part-time internship with their community garden initiative. They worked with low-income neighborhoods, teaching sustainable gardening and food education. It paid. It mattered. Alina said yes. The first time she stepped into the garden center, her hands instinctively reached for the soil, and something inside her settled. She had been mocked, humiliated, misjudged, but she hadn't broken. She had grown. And now, she was planting seeds, not just in the ground, but in herself. 1 year later, the air outside the downtown city services building buzzed with summer heat and the low hum of passing traffic. Alina James stood on the sidewalk, clipboard in hand, her hair pulled back, a quiet confidence in her posture. At 17, she now volunteered with a youth outreach program, helping at-risk girls fill out mentorship and job applications, girls who reminded her of who she used to be, unsure, overlooked, carrying more than anyone their age should. One of the girls she mentored stood nearby, clutching a bundle of hand-picked flowers. A passerby paused, smiled, and bought the bouquet with a few kind words before strolling off. The girl stared after them, puzzled, then turned to Alina and asked, "Why do people still want flowers?" Alina looked at her for a moment, then smiled, her voice soft but sure, "Because they remind people to see what's growing even in the cracks." The girl nodded, still thinking it over, and Alina turned her gaze across the street. Parked along the curb was a familiar black car, quiet and still. Through the windshield, she could just make out the silhouette of Marcus Langford. He didn't wave or call out, he only nodded once, a simple acknowledgement between two people who had changed each other's lives. Then, as quietly as he'd come, he drove away. Alina watched him go, not with longing or dependence, but with gratitude and strength. She didn't need saving anymore. She was the one reaching back, offering a hand. She was the one who saw